Good to have you with us on this Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
Exciting is it that it's Friday? There's some good news. I'm Savannah Saunders. We're going to get started in Washington with President Biden's final State of the Union address before this fall's general election.
The speech lasted just over an hour. He aggressively took on his critics as well as the man he consistently referred to as my predecessor. That, of course, is former President Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee. Mr. Biden focused on issues here domestically, including abortion rights, IVF, and the economy, as well as the southern border and the war between Israel and Hamas. The president also addressed his age, looking to ease the concerns of voters and his own party. Polls show his age, 81 right now, is a big issue for voters. He began his remarks by addressing the state of American democracy, reflecting on the January 6th attack on the Capitol just 2 weeks before he was inaugurated.
History is watching, just like history watched 3 years ago on January 6th. When insurrectionists stormed this very Capitol and placed a dagger to the throat of American democracy. America stood strong and democracy prevailed. We must be honest. The threat to democracy must be defended.
We have full coverage of the State of the Union, including reaction from Capitol Hill and the Middle East, plus a look at the implications the speech could have on the general election. Let's begin with NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez, who is in Tel Aviv, Israel. Good morning to both of you. Aaron, the president set a defiant tone during his remarks last night. Really, from the outset, walk us through some of the highlights of the State of the Union.
Yeah, Joe and Savannah, good morning. I think folks who are supporters of President Biden, we know as recently as December, have been asking to see a feistier Joe Biden take stages across America. And I think their opinion has been and is today that he delivered on that they were able to see a Joe Biden who was energetic, perhaps answering some of the concerns about his age and his physical fitness to sort of do what he's been doing, to be out on the campaign trail, and also address some of the other concerns that have come up about President Biden. We saw him standing there for 68 minutes, delivering that speech, going toe-to-toe at times with Republicans in the room, off script, going back and forth with them. And also, as you noted, Joe, addressing some of the issues that the president believes he's had success on in the 3 years that he's been in office, and some of the things that he wants to do, the job that he wants to finish, as he said several times, going forward. This was a speech that was a report card on the nation in terms of what we expect from a State of the Union, but also very much had the tone of a campaign speech. We heard the president talk about abortion in particular and direct some of his comments at the Supreme Court justices who were sitting in the front row. They typically are stone-faced, don't respond to things that are said, they don't applaud. Here's that moment from the president's speech last night.
Those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again.
And now, as is typically the case after the State of the Union, the president hits the road. We know that he will be in Pennsylvania today for a campaign event, in Georgia tomorrow for another campaign event. At the same time, many members of the administration, secretaries and other people in leadership positions are also hitting the road to deliver the president's message.
So following the president's speech, we, of course, then heard the GOP response. This year it was given by Alabama freshman Senator Katie Britt. Tell us about her message.
Yeah, the 42-year-old senator from Alabama, a sharp contrast certainly in age to President Biden at 81, delivered this response that was at times intense and presented a United States that is in despair in many ways. She pointed out that she believes the Republican Party is the party of family, is the party that will create economic prosperity across the nation. She presented President Biden as, in her words, someone who is a leader who is dithering and diminished, and not in command. And I want you to hear a little bit of what she said in her remarks last night.
What we saw was the performance of a permanent politician who has actually been in office for longer than I've been alive. One thing was quite clear, though. President Biden just doesn't get it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable.
She made the case that President Biden has the authority and the power to secure the border by executive order. The president, of course, in his speech said that Congress needs to deliver a border legislation package that has seen broad support in the Congress. And at this point, she never, and the president didn't either, she never identified former President Trump by name, but certainly made the case that he would support policies that the nation would approve, and that he should be reelected, Joe and Savannah.
Raf, let's bring you into the conversation here because international relations are so important right now. President Biden discussed the war between Israel and Hamas. He's continued to call for an immediate temporary ceasefire. How did he address this now 5-month-long war?
So, Joe, he started this section of his speech by reminding the audience of the horrors of October 7th. He talked about the 1,200 Israelis massacred. He reminded the audience this is the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. But then he turned to the horrors that have been unfolding in Gaza over the last 5 months and continue to unfold today. 30,000 people killed, he said, the majority of whom are civilians. And he talked about the urgent need to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza to fend off a looming famine. Take a listen.
I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. And I've been told I'm too old. It deserves to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I won't walk away from it now.
So that wasn't the right sound, but he talked about the urgent need to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza. And he said that ultimately, the only solution that is going to bring peace to both Israelis and to Palestinians is a two-state solution. And that is something that puts him in a direct diplomatic, political collision course with the far-right government of Benjamin Netanyahu, who say they will not accept a two-state solution at any time, but especially not after October 7th. Guys.
Absolutely. Raf, thank you for rolling with that. Thank you for paraphrasing. That was, of course, comments on his age, which is a conversation we're going to have in just a moment. But back to Gaza, we know that 16 pallets containing more than 52,000 meals were dropped yesterday as part of a joint U.S.-Jordanian operation to bring aid to Gaza. But one of the big parts of this president's speech was announcing he's directing the U.S. military to establish a pier on the coast of Gaza for the delivery of aid. Is that something that's really going to happen? And if so, how?
So, Savannah, the U.S., a bunch of European allies, the UAE, just put out a statement this morning where they acknowledge that this operation is going to be complex, that there will need to be adjustments, but they say it is necessary to get that aid into Gaza. Here's the broad outline. Aid will be loaded onto ships in Cyprus. It will be inspected by Israeli officials there, carried on those ships across the Mediterranean, and then it will reach that American military pier just off the coast of Gaza, and from there it will be delivered onto land. Now, the president stressed there will not be American military boots on the ground inside Gaza as part of this operation, but that doesn't mean that this isn't dangerous. You're going to have U.S. service members just off the coast of an active war zone. They will be within range of the weapons of Hamas, of Islamic Jihad, which is an Iranian paramilitary group supported by Iran, similar to the militant groups that we have seen taking shots at U.S. forces all across the Middle East. President Biden says this is his commitment to making sure that aid gets through. And unlike these airdrops, which we've been seeing over the last week or so, ships have the potential to carry really very large amounts of aid in a single go. But we will see how long it takes to get this pier up and running and what kind of delivery, what kind of problems it faces once it's up. Guys.
Aaron and Raf, thank you both for kicking us off this hour.
And for more, we are now joined by NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen, as well as former Obama speechwriter and best-selling author David Litt. Thank you both for joining us. So, John, I'm going to get started with you. The president is gearing up for an election rematch essentially this fall against Donald Trump. And one of the big things that we just mentioned a moment ago, there's been concerns raised about his age as he goes for this second term. Walk us through the tone the president displayed in his remarks as he tried to ease voters' worries about that particular issue and his mental fitness.
Yeah, there were two parts to that, Savannah. The first is he was joking about it, as you saw in the clip just a moment ago, as folks at home just saw in that clip. The president was lighthearted about it on one level, and then also, basically made a point that Americans should be respected throughout their lives. I think that's, sort of a play for sympathy. But the other piece of this, and I think the one that is more important than the words that come out of his mouth, was the vigor that he had last night. This was Joe Biden, basically in campaign mode, in full campaign mode, somebody who's won 10 consecutive elections, all of the elections he's ever run in, he's won. And he's used to being on a stump. It was, I think, more forceful even than you would have seen from him in his Senate days, but a little similar to that in terms of just that energy that he has. And honestly, there's nothing that he can do better than show that energy that his critics say he doesn't have, than show the capacity that his critics say he doesn't have. And with the exception of a couple of fumbles from the podium last night, what you saw was a very strong version of Joe Biden.
David, let's turn to you. The president also addressed Republican hecklers. This was something we discussed with you yesterday. At times, he seemed to relish the exchanges, struggled a little more in the exchange on immigration with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Overall, how do you think he did taking on that issue, and just what did you make of the speech overall?
Well, first of all, Joe and Savannah, thank you for having me back this morning. I think when we talked yesterday to preview the speech, there was this question, an open question of, if a moment like that came, who would look in command? I mean, the Republican argument for Donald Trump's election right now hinges in large part on this idea that when a moment like that comes, we're going to see that Joe Biden is not up to the task. All I would say to anybody this morning who still feels that way is go look at the tape. And I think that's a huge difference. I mean, I think politically we're in a different place this morning than we were yesterday, because Joe Biden, obviously I'm a Democrat. I'm going to be very excited when he goes toe to toe with a heckler. But it was also what he was talking about. He was talking about defending Social Security and Medicaid. There was a moment you mentioned with Marjorie Taylor Greene where he showed genuine empathy. I mean, before the speech, people were saying he's never going to say the name of someone who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant. And in fact, he did. And he talked directly to her parents and said, I've lost children too. So he also showed some of that empathy, that one-on-one quality that is really Biden's best quality as politician. He got a lot of work done in one night. And I think Democrats and really anybody who is worried about the prospect of a second Trump term are really happy this morning.
John, let's talk about the former President Trump of it all. President Biden alluded to him more than a dozen times, but without really mentioning his name. We also mentioned that was a theme in the GOP response as well. You kind of say that these remarks amounted to essentially a fiery campaign stump speech. What does that mean for what's ahead over the next few months?
It's going to be nothing but politics from here on out to November. I know people feel like it's always that way, but here's the president standing in front of the Congress in the last year of certainly his first term, what could be the last year of his presidency. This was an unusual tone. Typically what you see from presidents, even in re-election years, is at least a veiled politics, some sort of pretense that they are not engaged totally in politics and that they would like Congress to really work with them to get some things done. In this case, that was almost an afterthought. This was very much a pure political speech. You said that President Biden did not say former President Trump's name, but he did refer to him. The entire speech was basically about Donald Trump.
David, with the election now several months ahead, polls show that this is going to be a tight one till the very end. What do you think the president needs to do to persuade voters, especially those who maybe voted for him 4 years ago but are on the fence right now, to try and give him 4 more years?
Well, I think the most important thing that Joe Biden can do is keep doing what he did last night. If you looked at some of the polling immediately after the speech among speech watchers, I believe 45% said that the president's policies would put the country on the right track. That was before the speech. After the speech, it was up to 62%, 17% in just one speech, and a clear majority. So if he can continue to do that, both demonstrate that he is the kind of leader that we need, but also a policy agenda that is in such sharp contrast to the one being offered by, as John pointed out, his predecessor, that is going to be a way not just for him to pull ahead, but but even to win decisively if he can get that message out there.
John, Alan, David, Litt, thank you both very much for joining us.
Let's bring in NBC News reporter Gary Grum back with more reaction from Capitol Hill. So, Gary, Republicans left the chamber last night telling NBC News they thought the speech was politically divisive. What were some of their strongest reactions?
Hey, good morning, Joe. Yeah, this was part presidential address and part campaign speech, as you guys were just talking about. When it comes down to it, this is a guy that would really like to get reelected, but half the room there would very much like to see him not get reelected and would like to see Donald Trump in office. So certainly there was a conversation of partisan issues, Ukraine, Israel, the border. But one of the strongest reactions, you saw actually the entire speech. It was House Speaker Mike Johnson sitting directly behind the president. You saw the facial expressions. You saw the head nodding and the shaking of the head when he disagreed with something. Here's what he had to say afterwards to reporters.
It was a completely hyper-partisan speech. I don't know how else to describe it. It was a campaign speech and a pretty vitriolic one at that. And so, you know, people are saying that I made funny facial expressions. I tried to keep a poker face, but it was very difficult. I disagreed so vehemently with so much of what he said, and I think the people back home did as well.
Now, Senator Mitt Romney, Republican, also had a reaction. He said if it was his State of the Union, it would have been 10 minutes long. Guys.
We also saw many House Democrats wearing white to signal support for abortion rights and women's rights. What has Biden's own party been saying? Did he give them what they wanted to hear on that point?
Well, this has, as we know, been the largest issue as it relates to what voters really care about. We saw it in the midterms in 2022. We saw it in some of the statewide elections across the country in 2023. And we are bound to see it here in 2024. And Donald Trump is very pleased with the fact that he is the reason why Roe v. Wade was overturned with the election, the selection of the Supreme Court justices. Joe Biden came out last night. The president came out and said he wants to re-legalize Roe v. Wade and bring that back into the conversation should he get reelected.
Gary, real quick here, let's turn to the deal to avert a government shutdown. The House passed the first of several funding packages this week that Congress needs to prevent that from happening. Bill now heads to the Senate for passage before tonight's deadline. What's in it? Is it going to get through?
Yeah, it's not all fun and games over there at the Capitol. They are getting down to real serious business here, and that is funding the government. The first part happens tonight. We do expect the Senate to make this passage. As you had on the screen there, there were multiple parts of the government that will be funded this Friday. Today, it included agriculture, energy, housing and urban development, commerce, and interior. But there's still a big question about the other half of the government that runs out of money next Friday, so we'll have to see what happens there. Joe?
Clock ticking again. All right, Gary, thank you so much.
Let's get you the latest on the forecast. A severe storm threat could impact millions today and tomorrow across the southeast. For more, let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman's with us. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Finally Friday, and boy, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to the weather. We've got some thunderstorms that have already erupted across much of the southern plains. We've got folks in this action here along the Gulf Coast, and it stretches up into parts of the Great Lakes. We've even got some snow falling the farther west you look. Here's the deal, though. We're going to see a batch of moisture work up into parts of the Great Lakes through the day today. We'll see some stronger storms across parts of the southeast. There is a severe risk from East Texas stretching into the Florida Panhandle today. I'll show you those impacts in a moment, but all that moisture works east here as we get through the day tomorrow. It works into parts of the mid-Atlantic. The Northeast gets in on this, and we could even see some snow falling on the backside of the system by the time we get into your Sunday. So a soggy forecast for folks across the Northeast, the mid-Atlantic, even parts of the Southeast here for your Saturday. Sunday, though, we'll pick up on some of that snow, some of the lake effect snow across that region. But today, it's all eyes on parts of the Gulf Coast. We've got from Texas to Florida under the potential to see some of these stronger storms, even severe storms. The bullseye right now, Alexandria, Jackson, looks like it's right in the middle of that. The potential mainly to see some large hail. We'll also see the chance for some strong wind gusts, and we, of course, can't rule out some of these stronger tornadoes. One or two of those possible here as we get into the afternoon and evening hours. We've already got flood alerts up in preparation for some of this heavy rain working across that area. 14 million people included in this. Atlanta, Birmingham, Jackson, some of the metro areas that are under those flood watches right now. And the potential for flash flooding is there. We'll see really impressive rainfall rates here over the next day or so across this region. This is going to last through even early tomorrow morning. So overnight, the flash flooding risk will still be there for this region. We're expecting anywhere from widespread amounts, an inch to 2 and even 3 inches, but we could see upwards of 6, 7, even isolated amounts up to 8 inches. You see Montgomery right in the bullseye there where we could see those greatest amounts totaling. And guys, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but daylight saving time begins 2 a.m. on Sunday. That means we are springing ahead. It's a good sign because it means spring is around the corner, warmer temperatures. But yes, you're going to have a little bit of a shorter weekend. That's going to happen here as we go from Saturday into Sunday.
But the sun will set a little later, so
it will. See, that's the positive of it.
There
after 7 p.m.
There you go. All right, Angie.
Shorter weekend day. I guess that's true.
At least it's while you're sleeping.
Yeah. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.